Hi, everyone, and welcome. AI in the enterprise. Today, we're going to pick up an area that I think is very critical to any large enterprise across the globe, large and small, actually, and that's the world of finance and accounting. Look, this is a time like never before. The pandemic has shifted the normal into the new normal, and corporations across the globe are figuring out ways to deal with this new normal and keep the machine running and keep the engine going. In all of that, you look at the work Genpact does, which is we basically are responsible for keeping the engine running for finance and accounting and a large set of enterprise processes for large corporations across the globe. And at the core of that effort, there's a lot of effort on taking that body of work, designing, transforming, and bringing into play to deal with the new situation at hand. At the center of all of that is our finance transformation team. This is the team that actually leads and drives the transformation for the finance and accounting functions for some of the largest corporations around the world. And at the center of that, I want to bring in the leader for that work. It's Prakash Hariharan. Prakash, welcome to the episode.
Thank you, Sanjay. I'm excited to be on the show. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Prakash. I know it's going to complete another time of the day and the part of the world we're catching you today. So I appreciate you joining in. And I know that you're in the middle of a move across continents, and I'm sure that's got to be crazy in the current travel situation. But good luck with that and all the best. And I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something that's really close to heart for me. Look, organizations are going through a lot. Cash is becoming really important. It's always been, but it's getting more important. And I have to imagine that the key challenges that are coming through are at a pace and speed that's never happened before. As you work with enterprises across the globe and as you advise and consult them on the top issues to tackle, what are some of the biggest things you're seeing and hearing from these environments?
Yeah, so Sanjay, let me start by saying that organizations are dealing with a lot right now. There is still a huge amount of uncertainty. And I think most companies are trying to balance employee safety with plans to coming back to normal. But if I were to go outside of that, as I speak to CFOs and the other finance leaders from across the industries, there are three things which are emerging top and center. Number one is the focus on cash and liquidity management. Number two is the emphasis on performance management and financial planning. And number three is this area around scenario modeling.
Fantastic. So, this is really interesting because you picked up on cash. It was top of mind for me. We're seeing the liquidity crisis evolve around the globe. Tell me a little bit about it. Let's unpack cash and liquidity management. What's the trend line there, and how do you get through the challenges?
Yeah. So Sanjay, cash has always been important for organizations. But what is changing now is the fact that the intensity and the focus on improving cash has come down from quarters and months to days and weeks. And in order for these kind of improvements to be realized in this sort of a fast and accelerated fashion, there has to be a new level of intelligence that has to be built into the process. So what organizations can perhaps do is to use the underlying transactional data and segment their customers and or suppliers into different segments based on the level of strategic importance, the past behavior, and so on and so forth, and then apply very contextual strategies for each one of those segments in order for them to drive performance, right? And I think as they do that, there are two things which I think are going to be extremely important. One is a lot of the analysis has to be forward-looking. So therefore, I think the entire notion of being predictive is going to accelerate a lot more. And the second thing is that all of this has to be dynamic. It has to be fast-paced and agile in order for organizations to react quickly. Now, in addition to this, the other interesting thing that we're seeing is that for the first time, cash is becoming a business-led initiative rather than being a finance-led initiative, which therefore increases the chances of success.
Yeah, that's so true, Prakash. Cash is actually now a business-led initiative. It's no longer a finance and accounting initiative only, if you will. And so that brings it into real prominence. And, when you talk about cash, it strikes me you're talking about working capital, you're talking about inventory turns, you're talking about accounts receivable, you're talking about accounts payable. And one of the thoughts that came to my mind as you were speaking is, it would appear in accounts receivable when you look at credit and payment history and make appropriate decisions. And you're right, segmenting becomes so important because the rules have changed. A lot of the business rules that we set up previous to this no longer apply because how you evaluate credit and how you actually predict payment terms becomes very different in the slide. And so I want to pick a point you made, which is dynamic and agile and being able to adapt to the new environment. That is so key. And really, there's no way to get to that without using the right digital technologies to enable that. So I completely resonate with you on that. Let me pick your second area. I think you talked about performance management. You talked about financial planning, and that's got to be key because the business models have changed. The supply chain, the demand chain has changed. Tell us a little bit more about how you're seeing that world evolve.
Yeah. So as organizations are taking a set of actions, I think they need to quickly understand if those actions are working as per the plan or not. And if not, they need to be able to kind of make some quick changes. And therefore, if you look at it, the performance management process and timelines is going to get increasingly crunched. So in a typical organization, which used to take approximately 10 to 12 weeks for the pre-planning process and for the strategic planning process, and then coming on to the operation planning activities, that timeline, I think, is going to be a lot more tighter now in order for businesses to kind of react quickly. And in order for them to do that, one of the things which I think will happen increasingly now going forward is the adoption of machine learning and AI technologies. Because one, obviously, it reduces the timeline for you to kind of quickly go back and replan the effort, and two, it increases the accuracy as well, right? So I think it's going to be extremely exciting on this particular area, which is performance management and planning.
It strikes me as you talk about this, and you did this in your first layer as well, is that there's a lot of, what I'm hearing from you, there's a lot of focus on condensing months into weeks, into quarters, into days, right? That whole conversion of cycle time to make decisions becoming super important. And it makes sense because the world's changing faster than we've ever known it to be. And of course, as we all come back to work now, it changes yet again, and staying on top of it. And it strikes me that, you never want to waste a good crisis. It's been said before. And in some ways, one of the biggest learnings from there is the deep infusion of sort of the backbone of data, the foundation of technology that allows you to make those decisions. This is about as good a time to get that in and set yourselves up for success.
Yeah.
Okay, let's change gears. You had a third point, and as you said the third point, and that was the bit about scenario planning. What came to mind was a recent conversation I've been having with a CFO of a top Fortune 50 company. And one of the things he impressed upon me in that conversation was he was talking about getting together with a peer group of CFOs across North America and just talking through business risks that, set of peers, get together, once a year and discuss collectively to get a handle on it. And what was striking is that they came with a list of top 25 risks, having talked through a whole bunch of risks that at that time, the word pandemic was nowhere in that list, right? So it just talks to how fast the models and the scenarios changing, and you bring scenario planning up. But in a world of that level of uncertainty, how do you even do it right? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think you're right. Given the amount of uncertainty and ambiguity out there still, organizations need to scenario model a lot. So for example, if you look at it in the last few weeks, the demand curve for almost every company out there has completely changed. And I think as we emerge from the crisis, even the composition of the demand, because of the new consumer preferences, is going to be completely different. Now, the challenge is that no one is able to predict as to how will that curve look like, how will the preferences look like once this crisis gets over. And therefore, scenario modeling is extremely important in order for organizations to model different situations coming out of this crisis. And then as they kind of learn new things, as the situation evolves, how do you keep refining the model and then adjusting a bunch of other things? For example, in this case, the supply strategy, in order for you to balance outcomes like working capital and, consumer experience and customer experience, to be able to kind of match the demand and supply more properly. And if you look at it, in a lot of this, AI and digital technologies is going to play a significant role. They will enable the ingestion of external data. They will allow it to be converted into a structured output, which can then be fed into all these different algorithms, which are the foundational backbone of any scenario modeling exercise, right? So therefore, I think, given the uncertainty out there, organizations will have to increasingly adopt the way they will have to guide their business, which is on this basis of the scenario models.
I love it. I love your focus on proactively and strategically putting in the right foundation of digital and you talk about AI, you talk about modeling, you talk about machine learning. I mean, these are key components to get right so that you're able to deal with the situation in a much more agile fashion. So listen, it's been fantastic just conversing with you, because I think cash is, as you said, is a business-led function. It's getting increasingly important, and the finance and accounting teams are leading, for many of the corporations they serve, the way out of this current disruption, if you will. And in all of that, the infusion of technology and digital led by people like you and the peers and your peers is just fantastic to see. If you had to leave us today, Prakash, with 2 or 3 thoughts, just so that we have a framework for getting started, what would be a few things top of mind you want to leave us with?
Yeah. So I think at a strategic level, I would say, Sanjay, that the CFO function is never going to be the same. If you look at it in the last 12 to 18 months, there has been a significant adoption of AI and automation and analytics in the CFO function, but very few companies have really used it to completely reimagine their finance function. And I think that's going to change now going forward. Now, the opportunity that the CFOs have is to kind of prioritize the following key trends and initiatives, which is really the movement to cloud, the focus on data and insights, and I think the increasing digitization of the end-to-end value chains, right? And I think CFOs who are the leaders in making CFOs who will make most of this particular opportunity will, I think, emerge as the leaders, not only from taking the performance of their finance function onto a different level, but also becoming a better business partner to the overall organization. So I think it's a huge opportunity for the CFO and the finance function to kind of lead from the front as the crisis kind of unfolds, according to me.
It's a great perspective, Prakash, and it's so relevant, so important now than ever before. I'm also going to turn to our audience a little bit and say, as you hear all the things that we've talked about here, what are a few things that didn't make the cut, that you didn't hear us talk about, that you think are great ideas, that are examples of things you've seen? We'd love to hear from you. I know the community would benefit from it. So please take a minute and just pen any thoughts on our LinkedIn chat. Prakash, I want to turn back to you and just thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's late evening, your time, in the part of the world you're in. I really appreciate your time together. And look, folks, the idea of thinking about the new normal, the idea about using finance and cash and scenario modeling as a valuable differentiation to the company, and the idea of getting organized around that with the right digital and technology approaches, so key. The time is right. It's here now today. Prakash, thank you. To our audience, thanks for joining in. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.